There it was, the moment that stopped the scrolling thumbs of millions. A congressional chamber, tense with the stale air of politics as usual, suddenly crackled with the heat of raw confrontation. Liz Cheney, once praised as the last of her family's unbroken line of political warriors, was no longer calculated or measured. She was red-faced, leaning forward, voice raised to a pitch that sounded less like authority and more like desperation. Every syllable came out sharp, pointed, desperate to wound. She was yelling. Across from her sat Jasmine Crockett, unshaken, silent. Eyes locked, shoulders squared, and most disarming of all, a calm, knowing smile tugging at the corner of her lips. A smile that didn't mock, didn't retreat, didn't tremble. A smile that told the world, "You cannot break me." That image. The fury of Cheney colliding with the composure of Crockett became a still frame of history. Screens across America lit up with the clip. Viewers gasped, comment sections exploded, memes multiplied within minutes. And in every retelling, one question echoed louder than the yelling itself. How did it come to this? Because in that frozen moment, power seemed to shift. Cheney's anger, once her weapon, revealed its weakness. Crockett's stillness, once mistaken for vulnerability, became her armor. The contrast was almost too perfect to believe. It was politics distilled into myth. The old guard shouting to be heard, the new voice refusing to be silenced. And yet, it was not just the clash of two politicians. To many watching, it was the clash of two Americas, the arrogance of inherited entitlement versus the resilience of lived struggle. The smile that Cheney couldn't erase carried with it generations of survival, faith, and unshakable pride. The audience leaned in, hungry to understand. Was this just another viral spat in an endless cycle of outrage, or was it the crack in the facade of power that people had been waiting for? One thing was certain. Crockett's silence spoke louder than Cheney's fury, and it left a scar across the stage that no outburst could erase. But what led to this explosive moment? The story is even more shocking than the clip. Before the yelling, before the smile, the chamber was already humming with anticipation. This was no ordinary exchange. It was a collision of legacies, ideologies, and visions of what America should be. On one side stood Liz Cheney, daughter of a political dynasty, carved into Washington's marble halls long before she ever set foot there herself. To her supporters, she was the voice of principled conservatism, the one who dared break ranks with her party when it suited her sense of righteousness. To her critics, she embodied a brand of politics that never quite shed the arrogance of privilege, the entitlement of a family name that opened every door before she even knocked. Across from her sat Jasmine Crockett, a rising figure whose story could not have been written in those same gilded corridors. Crockett's rise was born not of legacy, but of resilience. She carried the weight of a community behind her, a story of perseverance in the face of barriers that would have stopped most long before they began. Her presence in that chamber represented not just a personal victory, but a collective one. Proof that voices long dismissed were now demanding to be heard. And so the debate was never just about policy points or partisan talking heads. It was about something deeper: what kind of America the people watching wanted to inherit. An America defined by the loud echoes of old power, or an America shaped by calm, steady voices refusing to be shouted down. Cheney's reputation preceded her: polished speeches, sharp elbows, and a belief that volume equaled strength. But Crockett's influence was growing in ways that unnerved the establishment. She didn't just speak. She embodied a living challenge to the hierarchy Cheney represented. And when the two sat facing each other, it wasn't just two women debating. It was a generational duel, a cultural reckoning, and a political drama that carried the weight of a nation's identity crisis. Every glare, every word, every pause carried symbolism. Cheney represented the politics of inheritance, the idea that power belongs to those who were born into it. Crockett represented the politics of emergence, the idea that power can rise from the people. That dignity doesn't require a dynasty to make its mark. That's why the confrontation mattered. That's why the clip went viral. Because beneath the surface of a heated argument lay the beating heart of America's struggle with itself. Who gets to lead? Who gets to define the narrative? Who gets to speak without being drowned in someone else's noise? The stakes weren't just high, they were generational. They were about whether the future would belong to those who cling to their family names or to those who forge their own against all odds. No one expected what happened next, and once it happened, the entire room shifted. Liz Cheney's name was etched into America's political story long before she ever entered the chamber that day. She was not just another politician. She was the daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney, a man whose shadow loomed over decades of American wars, policies, and scandals. Born into a dynasty, Liz carried the Cheney name like both a weapon and a shield. It opened doors others could never dream of walking through, and it gave her an aura of inevitability. Power was her inheritance. For years, she played the role well. Sharp in her delivery, polished in her presentation, Cheney cultivated an image of herself as both a survivor and a moral guide. She framed herself as the voice of principle, the conservative unafraid to stand alone when her party spiraled into chaos. The press labeled her courageous for defying the cult of personality within her own ranks. To some, she became a beacon of accountability in an era when truth felt like it was collapsing. But beneath that polished exterior lived contradictions that were harder to ignore. This defender of truth had never reckoned with her own family's history. She spoke of democracy, yet carried the legacy of an administration tied to torture. Memos, surveillance overreach, and the war in Iraq, a war her father championed on shaky grounds. She positioned herself as a champion of integrity. Yet critics argued that her moral compass only appeared when it suited her narrative. Cheney mastered the art of righteous outrage, often wielding it like a sword. She knew when to raise her voice, when to call out opponents, when to lean into indignation. It gave her the aura of strength, the sense that she was always on the offensive. But anger, when it becomes a performance, eventually reveals fragility. And Cheney's reliance on volume and posture hid a truth she couldn't admit. Her authority was brittle, dependent on a name and a platform she did not entirely build herself. As she sat across from Jasmine Crockett, Cheney carried all of this history with her. She believed her record gave her the right to dominate the room. She believed her moral branding would intimidate. She believed the old rules of politics where family names silenced newcomers still applied. What she didn't account for was how those contradictions would be exposed by something far more powerful than yelling: silence. Cheney's strategy had always been to overwhelm, to drown out, to seize the stage. But against Crockett's calm, against a smile that spoke of battles fought and survived outside the insulated halls of dynasty, her tactics began to look less like strength and more like desperation. And in that transformation lay the unraveling. The dynasty daughter who had framed herself as America's conscience would find her authority slipping, not because of a devastating insult, but because Crockett refused to play the game by Cheney's rules. Because Crockett's story, her very identity, would become Cheney's undoing. Jasmine Crockett's journey into that chamber did not begin in the marbled hallways of Washington. It began in the neighborhoods and classrooms where opportunity was not guaranteed, where every step forward demanded persistence, where resilience was not a slogan, but a survival skill. Crockett was not born into a dynasty. She was born into struggle. And it was precisely that difference which made her presence in the chamber electric. Long before her name trended across social media, Crockett was known for her grounding in community work. She cut her teeth not by inheriting power, but by fighting for those who had none. As a public defender, she stood beside people who could not afford a voice, who were too often silenced by a system stacked against them. Courtrooms became her training ground, where she sharpened her wit, mastered composure under fire, and learned the art of turning pressure into precision. Every case she argued, every family she stood beside, added to her armor. Unlike Cheney, Crockett's strength wasn't polished in think tanks or cocktail receptions. It was forged in late nights reading case files for clients who couldn't pay her a dime, in standing before judges who doubted her, in explaining to families that justice was still worth fighting for even when the odds seemed merciless. Her story resonated because it was relatable. She didn't stand in that chamber as a symbol of privilege. She stood there as proof that dignity and drive could carry someone into spaces designed to keep them out. For many watching, her very presence was a reminder of possibility. For those who had been told their voice didn't matter, Crockett was living, breathing evidence that it did. But Crockett was not just empathetic. She was sharp. Her reputation preceded her as a quick thinker, able to slice through hollow rhetoric with a single pointed remark. Yet she never wielded her intelligence cruelly. She delivered her points, with clarity, with calm, with a refusal to let arrogance dictate the tempo of her responses. That composure became her signature. And in a political world addicted to outrage, Crockett's restraint was revolutionary. Where others screamed, she stayed measured. Where others tried to dominate through volume, she leaned into the quiet confidence of someone who knew her truth did not need to shout. That balanced compassion fused with steel was what unsettled opponents. They expected anger. They expected her to mirror their hostility. Instead, they were met with poise. It was that same poise that made her smile in the face of Cheney's yelling so devastating. Because for Crockett, calm was not weakness. It was power. Power that came from knowing she had already overcome far greater battles than the bluster of a dynasty's daughter. Power that came from years of proving herself in spaces where no one expected her to belong. Her calm smile was not rehearsed. It was earned. It was the culmination of a lifetime of refusing to be broken. And in that chamber, it exposed Cheney's fragility with surgical precision. Crockett's presence reminded the audience that true strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes true strength simply refuses to flinch. By the time millions replayed the clip, that smile became more than a reaction. It became a symbol of resilience, of dignity, of the quiet thunder that rises when arrogance meets authenticity. And it left the nation wondering, if this is how Crockett responds under pressure, what else might she be capable of when the stakes are even higher? Because while Cheney wielded a name, Crockett wielded something far more dangerous to the old order: credibility born of lived struggle. And it was that credibility wrapped in silence, carried by a smile that would expose Cheney's unraveling in ways no one saw coming. The chamber grew hotter with every passing moment, though no thermostat had changed. It was the temperature of tension, of words stacked like tinder, waiting for a spark. Liz Cheney, seated with the posture of a soldier ready for battle, launched her accusations with the precision of someone convinced her authority would be enough to command silence. But silence never came. Jasmine Crockett sat across from her, shoulders steady, her gaze unblinking, her calm presence refusing to yield to the storm. Cheney's words grew louder, as though volume itself could validate her claims. She interrupted, cutting across Crockett's attempts to answer. She pressed again and again, repeating lines that began to sound less like reasoned arguments and more like rehearsed indictments. The more she spoke, the more the chamber began to sense the shift. Her fury was not convincing. It was unraveling. Her voice, meant to project strength, now carried the sharp edge of insecurity. Crockett did not flinch. Each interruption met the same response: a pause, a breath, and that small, almost imperceptible smile that seemed to whisper, "Is this really all you've got?" For viewers at home, it was maddening and magnetic at once. They watched Cheney's desperation mount, while Crockett's stillness radiated control. It was a duel not of words but of energy, and one side was running out of ammunition fast. The audience watching in real time began to take sides. On social media, live tweets exploded with frustration. "Let her speak," one user wrote. "Why does Cheney sound so desperate?" asked another. The collective reaction grew louder than Cheney's voice itself, as millions found themselves rooting for Crockett's release. The counterstrike everyone knew was coming. But Crockett held back. She let Cheney overextend, allowed her opponent to show the cracks in her composure. Each interruption painted Cheney not as strong, but as insecure. Each shout made Crockett's silence feel heavier, more deliberate. The tension tightened like a drumbeat, every passing second promising a release that hadn't yet arrived. Inside the chamber, the silence between Cheney's outbursts grew more telling than the outbursts themselves. Crockett, unmoved, kept her smile. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead for space. She simply waited, knowing the moment to strike would come, and when it did, it would be unforgettable. The crowd, both in the chamber and across the nation, leaned in. It was the anticipation before the storm, the pause before history pivots. And then, Crockett leaned forward with that calm smile, and the entire narrative shifted. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She let the last shout fade, then entered the quiet like a surgeon stepping into a bright operating room. "You've said a lot," she began, tone even, "but none of it changes the facts." The chamber's air thinned. She set her hands flat, as if stabilizing the table. "You framed this as attitude. It isn't. It's record." She started with the first claim. "You said the numbers prove failure." She lifted a sheet. "Here are the numbers with the baseline you left out, the context you skipped, and the trend line you ignored. Add them back, and what you call collapse is a recovery that took work, not theatrics." She didn't jab the page. She simply let it exist. A current moved through the room. The camera glanced at Cheney. The jaw clenched. The eyes hardened. The confidence thinned. "Second," Crockett said, "you attacked character to avoid the content. You called visibility vanity. I call it accountability. I'm visible so people who can't afford a microphone still hear their names in this chamber." She let the sentence breathe. A small smile formed, not triumphant, just true. It said, "I won't match your volume. I will exceed your substance." "Third," she continued, "history. You carry a last name that opened doors. I carry a last name that knocks them. The difference isn't status, it's responsibility. You were handed a platform. I was handed a community." She set the paper down and looked straight ahead. Screens lit up across the country. Twitter exploded with the words, "This is the moment she won." Cheney moved to interrupt. Crockett raised a palm, courteous, not defiant. "You spoke without interruption," she said. "Give me 60 seconds to answer." The country. The phrasing shifted the ground. She wasn't debating an opponent. She was reporting to citizens. "Chaos," she said, returning to the theme. "You've warned about it like it comes from people demanding dignity. But the chaos came from leaders who decided fear was cheaper than truth. I reject both the economics and the ethics of that decision." She turned a page. "You conflated correlation and causation. You conflated dissent and disloyalty. I won't apologize for refusing either." The pauses were part of the argument. Punctuation you could feel. On timelines, threads bloomed. Receipts, charts, clipped side by sides. "Thread of the year," someone wrote. "This is courtroom calm," another posted. Even skeptics nodded. "Don't like her politics, but this is surgical." Cheney tried to re-seize control. "With all due respect, you're ignoring risks." Crockett welcomed the line with a nod. "Let's talk about risk," she said. "The riskiest thing in our politics is pretending only certain families know how to love this country." She named 3 dangers: cynicism, where people conclude their vote buys nothing; cruelty, where policy treats pain as a lesson; and amnesia, where we forget who paid the cost for the rights we now debate like hobbies. Then she gave each danger a face: the shopkeeper rebuilding after fire, the student whose scholarship still leaves rent unpaid, the grandmother traveling, 2 buses to find fresh food. "These are citizens," she said quietly, "not data points." The next line arrived like a soft hammer. "I am not here to out-yell anyone. I am here to out-care them." A murmur rippled, then settled into attention. Cheney tried humor, a small scoff. It skidded. Crockett didn't chase it. "Care forces truth," she said. "And the truth is, volume isn't virtue. If your case held weight, it wouldn't need to sit on my shoulders." She folded the sheet and placed it aside. The gesture looked like cleanup after a finished operation. She resumed piece by piece, matching claims to outcomes. Where Cheney offered omen, Crockett presented result. Where Cheney leaned on pedigree, Crockett lifted community. Where Cheney projected certainty through sound, Crockett projected certainty through silence. "Strength doesn't shout over people," she said. "Strength stands with them." The trending column turned into a scoreboard. Her smile is the dagger. Grace over rage. This is the moment she won. Commentators clipped the precise second. Cheney's expression shifted from indignation to recognition, not of argument lost, but of habit ended. The old perimeter around power had a new gate, and it was open. Crockett kept her tempo. "My grandmother taught me there are loud storms and lasting storms," she said. "Loud storms rattle windows. Lasting storms redraw rivers." She turned her head, the smile returning without teeth. "You are loud today. We are lasting." The words rearranged the space. Even the microphones seemed to tilt toward her. "Allies of institutions love to talk marble," she continued. "But institutions are not marble and microphones. Institutions are trust. Trust is earned." She touched the desk, almost a benediction. "People have been measuring who earns it. They counted their hours. They counted their heartbreaks. Then they counted their ballots." Cheney inhaled to deliver the prepared summation. Crockett, already ahead of it, offered a bridge instead of a blow. "You don't have to agree with me," she said. "You just have to hear the people I bring with me. If you stop hearing them, you'll keep raising your voice. If you start hearing them, you won't need to." The line rang without sweetness, only clarity. She closed by refusing the cheap victory. "I don't need to win a moment," she said. "I need to win a future. Futures aren't won by yelling. They're won by building." A final quiet. I'm building." The sentence did not spike. It landed and rooted. The hush that followed wasn't emptiness. It was full. On screens everywhere, chat columns poured out hearts, flags, and the same 6-word text message sent from cousin to cousin, friend to friend. "You need to watch this now." Podcasts clipped the segment mid-recording. Editors chose a headline built from 3 verbs: outcare, outlast, outbuild. In the gallery, a staffer dropped a pen and didn't bother to pick it up. Across town, producers rewrote chirons in real time. Anchors traded both sides' caution for awe. A civil rights icon posted 3 words, "Hold that smile," and it became a hashtag within minutes. A country artist stitched the clip. A law professor called it a masterclass in burden shifting. Cheney exhaled, an uneven sound in a room that suddenly favored equilibrium. "Are you finished?" she asked, voice smaller. Crockett nodded gently, the calm smile returning as if from a long horizon. "For now." But the real shock came after. The debate when the world reacted. The debate was over, but the storm was just beginning. Within minutes of Jasmine Crockett's final words, the internet lit up like a live wire. The clip, just under 60 seconds, circulated across platforms with wildfire velocity. TikTok creators stitched her smile into montages of Black excellence. Twitter, already ablaze, cemented Lush calm like Crockett in the global trending column before the hour was out. The still frame Cheney mid-shout, Crockett unmoved, became the defining meme of the week, plastered over captions like, "When they yell, but you've already won." Political commentators raced to contextualize what they'd just witnessed. "We've seen fiery exchanges," one MSNBC anchor remarked, "but this was surgical. That smile wasn't shade, it was strategy." A former Republican strategist tweeted, "You can't outvolume someone who came in with silence as armor." Conservative outlets attempted damage control, but even their panels couldn't deny it. Crockett hadn't just won the argument, she had seized the moment. Podcasts pivoted entire episodes to unpack it. Editorial writers scrambled to interpret it. Influencers posted reactions ranging from lip-sync tributes to breakdowns of Crockett's rhetorical precision. "That's how you command a room," said one viral post from a political educator. "With clarity, not chaos." The memes kept coming. Crockett photoshopped onto historic battlefields, wielding calm like a weapon. Crockett photoshopped as Neo dodging Cheney's rhetorical bullets. "Smile, breathe, dismantle." Read one with minimalist design, already. Printed on t-shirts by the next morning. But the ripple effects weren't just digital. Late-night hosts referenced the moment in monologues. Cable news hosts replayed it in slow motion. An editorial in The Atlantic compared Crockett's composure to Thurgood Marshall's poise before the Supreme Court. "The calm smile," the article read, "is not passive. It is political warfare with velvet gloves." Even rivals took note. A centrist Democrat who had once questioned Crockett's partisan sharpness tweeted a rare public compliment. "That was grace under fire, period." A black Republican, not aligned with her politics, admitted, "She showed how poise can flip a power dynamic in real time." Meanwhile, Cheney found herself on the back foot. The same networks that once praised her defiance of Trumpism now quietly questioned whether her tactics were becoming performative. Headlines shaded into irony. "Cheney's Mike Crockett's drop." The Hill noted that, for someone so seasoned, Cheney looked caught off guard by a smile. One moment. One smile. That's all it took for Crockett to transcend the event itself. She wasn't just the woman who clapped back. She became the icon of a larger cultural hunger for control without cruelty, for strength without shouting, for intelligence that didn't apologize for existing loudly in the face of inherited arrogance. Think pieces poured in. Vox called her the calm that reshaped the chamber. Essence labeled the smile a generational reset. Teen Vogue profiled her within 48 hours, framing her as proof that our voices no longer need volume to matter. The Crockett effect had begun. On the ground, supporters mobilized. Young activists started quoting her lines in organizing meetings. Educators began referencing the moment in speech and debate clubs. One high school principal paused morning announcements to say, "Let's remember what it means to speak powerfully," like Jasmine Crockett. But it wasn't just admiration, it was ownership. People saw themselves in her. First-generation students, public defenders, working mothers, community organizers all felt spoken for. Her silence had echoed their stories louder than any scream could. And Cheney? She faded, if only briefly, into the backdrop of a media cycle that no longer viewed her as the lone moral voice among chaos. She had shouted, and the echo was empty. Crockett, by contrast, had shown what it looks like to win without needing to dominate, to assert without erasing, to rise without begging for permission. And the world took notice. The hashtags didn't stop. Calm like Crockett became more than a moment, it became a mantra, a mindset. And yet, as the interviews rolled in, the coverage intensified, and the applause reached its peak, Crockett stayed grounded. She tweeted only once that night, "I come from people who smile when it's hardest. That's all I did." It was more than enough. In the days that followed, reporters asked Jasmine Crockett how she stayed so composed. She smiled the same smile and said, "I wasn't performing, I was remembering." That was the heart of it. She hadn't been trying to win a moment. She was standing inside a truth larger than any insult hurled across a congressional desk. Her silence wasn't passive. It was ancestral. It was strategic. It was survival woven into strength. And in that moment, Crockett reframed not just a debate, but the very nature of political power. For too long, Americans had been taught that politics belongs to the loudest voice, the sharpest jab, the boldest interruption. But she offered another model, power anchored in dignity, not decibels. A reminder that truth doesn't need to yell to be heard. It only needs to stand firm. The confrontation had all the makings of a spectacle: rage versus reason, dynasty versus defiance. But Crockett elevated it into something deeper. She turned confrontation into clarity. Where Cheney brought volume, Crockett brought vision. Where Cheney reached for her name, Crockett stood in her purpose. She never labeled Cheney the villain. She didn't have to. The contrast said it all. In every clipped video, in every paused screenshot, the imbalance was obvious. One side lost control. The other held the room. One tried to dominate. The other chose not to flinch. And that was the lesson. That in politics, as in life, arrogance eventually collapses under the weight of its own performance. But dignity endures. Dignity spreads. Dignity multiplies. In the minds of those who witness it and think, maybe I can be that calm. Maybe I don't have to shrink, because Crockett's smile wasn't just a reaction, it was a revelation. It told people, especially those long talked over, that composure is not compliance. That stillness can be strategy. That being underestimated can be the most powerful position of all. The smile wasn't silence. It was power. The kind of power that doesn't just win arguments. It rewrites the expectations for who gets to lead. It gave permission to millions watching to believe in their own presence, their own calm, their own stories. And it left no doubt. The future of politics won't be built on who can shout the longest. It'll be built on who can listen longest without losing themselves. Crockett didn't walk away from that exchange with a mic drop. She walked away with something far more lasting, a blueprint. One that says you don't need to scream to be strong. You don't need to rage to be right. You don't need to carry a legacy to become legendary, because sometimes the most revolutionary act is refusing to be rattled, Liz Cheney yelled. Jasmine Crockett smiled. And in that one moment, the entire script flipped. What was meant to be a takedown became a turning point. What was intended as dominance turned into a demonstration of grace. And what started as noise ended in clarity because Crockett never let the yelling define her. She let her dignity do the talking. That smile wasn't just a reaction. It was a message to everyone watching. We don't have to play by their rules to win. We don't have to match their rage. We don't have to shrink when power gets loud. We rise by staying rooted. We resist by remaining still. We lead by standing tall, even when they try to shout us down. So if you saw yourself in that smile, if you felt a sense of pride swell in your chest as she held her ground, if you were one of the millions who whispered yes when she spoke, truth without raising her voice, then this story is yours too. This isn't just about two politicians. This is about the kind of leadership we want to follow, the kind of courage we want to carry, and the kind of future we're ready to build. If you believe dignity will always triumph over hate, share this video and let others feel what you just felt. Let them see the smile. Let them hear the silence. Let them remember what power really looks like, because calm isn't weakness. It's the beginning of a new kind of strength.